All right, we are live on YouTube according to my Zoom client. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 15 version of the Standards Working Group meeting. We've got a couple folks out today for vacation because it's that time of year. Woohoo! Hope you're all taking vacation this summer because those are nice to have. Let's start with announcements. Does anybody have any announcements? I've got just one little thing, FYI. There's a marketing committee meeting today for the foundation if you're interested in attending. I don't have any more news about the conference because it's over. So I guess the other announcement is if you missed it, you can go watch the talks on YouTube. And one of them, I think his name was Mark, and the talk was about PWAs, and he raps his talk, and it is really good. So you could watch that after you're done watching this. You should definitely, because it was
very unique and awesome.
Yes. Yeah. So those are the two announcements I have. Rap about it at PWA and marketing comm meeting. Okay, that's not very exciting, but still.
Refreshing and worth your time.
Right, it is. It was definitely. Next week we have our usual Tuesday meetings, but yeah. All right, cool. Write these notes. Oh, and I guess the other announcement is that Jory finally updated the notes. So there's a couple of pull requests for notes to review. If you don't mind taking a second to +1 those. Let me promote Mike Champ here. Come on. There we go. Cool. All right. Our first topic for today is Mike Samuels. Mike Samuels requesting 10 minutes to discuss API translation effort. This is issue 144.
I may try and grab the present then.
Yes. Can you do that? Or do I have to give you?
I think it's just because I don't know anything about computers.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm not seeing a share screen. Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I think the big green button.
Yeah.
Blame the computer.
All right. Can you guys see slides?
Yes.
Yes.
So rather than try and figure out how to do this in full screen, which is definitely beyond my meager technical abilities, I'll just show it as it is. So here's a screenshot of VS Code that just kind of set up and motivate the discussion. You can see there is a definition of a type, enum month, type day. After each of the identifiers, there is a translation to Spanish. So after month, there's mes, after day, there's dia. You can see down towards the bottom, const d:\day equals, and somebody is creating an object literal, and they've started typing year, they've started typing Y, they get the autocomplete for year, and it also shows año there. And so the idea here is that if we have developers who maybe they know a little bit of English, but their primary language is something else, they're pre-fluent in English, but they've got to interact with APIs written by fluent native English speakers all the time. And we could just make things a little bit easier for them by showing translations inline. And we would like those translations to be high quality so that they don't lead people down kind of rabbit holes. So rather than just taking identifiers and throwing them into Google Translate, I think we can do better. And so, yeah, we want to help pre-English fluent developers navigate English-centric APIs, for some values of English. There are other language communities besides English speakers who have a lot of developers, and they're also producing APIs. So for example, written Chinese comes to mind. And this has been a problem for a long time. How do we help pre-fluent people come into the larger community of software developers? And before now, the main problem has been, if you wanted to solve this, you would have to solve it for, if you wanted to solve it for N programming languages in M IDEs, you would have an N by M problem. You would have to write plugins for each IDE and for each language to find the identifiers and do that kind of stuff. But recently, there's been quite a lot of development in cross-programming language standards for IDE development. So language server protocol is a big one. And the idea behind LSP is that you can embed the language-specific smarts inside a language server, which runs in its own process, and it talks via JSON RPC to a language client. A language client is, for example, a VS Code plugin or the IDE itself. And so the language smarts, kind of what is an identifier? Where are the identifiers in their code? Given that the cursor is here in a text document, what are the autocomplete suggestions? All these answers can be asked, all these questions can be answered by the language server, leaving the language client free to focus on the presentation and the interactions. So, the language servers, they understand the programming language the developer is working in. They also understand the libraries to some degree. So if you're going to do completion requests, it's based on the set of type definitions and the set of APIs, the programmatic elements that are defined in things that you import into the file that you're working with. And recent recent language servers even for dynamic languages, very dynamic languages like Ruby, Python, and JavaScript, do a really good job of kind of figuring out what is, do a good job of autocomplete suggestion. So even where you're not dealing with a static language, there isn't a lot of available information about the library. And some of it is heuristic, but it's still high quality. And so, yeah, here's an example of the autocomplete request at the bottom. The Y, we figure out that, if they're typing Y based on the declared type of the record, year, month, and day are available, and then we filter it out, and it comes up with year. So, what the developer needs is they need to know the meaning of the identifiers they're working with. And the language server finds the identifiers. And the language server may also understand, for this programming language, translation, it knows a little bit about the library. It may know, it may understand things, a language server for JavaScript understands package.json. And so it can map, it can find metadata for libraries and maybe find translation bundles relating to that particular library, which allows it to give the translations to the IDE. And that allows the IDE, the language client, to focus on displaying those translations in a way that makes sense. So the IDE knows the user's preferred language based on their IDE settings. And so this kind of arrangement allows for a sensible division of duties. And now, per programming language, like if we fix a language server for one programming language to be translation aware and to better support developers, and we fix one language client, now we can assist many pre-fluent developers. There's no longer this problem of factoring languages and IDEs. And I think there's existing efforts like, I think open source is not here, but I know that he's been involved in translating Node docs. There have been large efforts to translate project documentation into many languages. And I think that API translation and documentation translation, they're different in many ways, but I think they're complementary. So with the documentation translation, things like Mozilla Docs, they're great. It's kind of top down. People who are very familiar with the project provide the content. And if you're inclined to read the manual, and you share some assumptions with the authors, then you can derive a lot of useful information out of it. This documentation is generally not available in the IDE when you're working. And it has the property that, you put in a big effort. You organize a bunch of people to translate whole documents, and you get a big result. But if somebody translates just a sentence, there's usually no result from that. The nice thing about API translation is it's bottom up. If a developer can figure out how to express one API element in their language, they could contribute that. They don't need to be intimately familiar with kind of, the workings of an entire project. You don't have to be reading the manual. The results of that translation can be available in the IDE right when you interact with it. And the effort kind of scales with the result. If you translate one term, that one term is available. If you translate 10 terms are available. So, API translation, I think, fills some gaps that documentation translation doesn't reach. And, if people are interested in this idea, I think it would be, I think what would be needed next. I am a native English speaker. I have never actually had this problem. I think, I think that any kind of goal setting and prioritization should probably be driven by somebody who has kind of experienced this before. They worked as a developer while they were pre-fluent, and maybe they struggled with English terminology and idioms in the APIs that they were using. And we would probably need some changes to the language server protocol so that there is a verb that you can use to request, there is a verb that a language client can use to request translations for identifiers, or some way to say, when you send me information about identifiers, also include the translation metadata. And we would probably need, the screenshot that I showed earlier, I just hacked translations in next to words. That's probably not the best way to present things. And so we would need somebody who understands, somebody better on user experience to kind of experiment with how to present translations. And then I think we'd probably need to hack together a VS Code plugin to actually do that, and maybe to make it easy for people to contribute translations. And it would probably be good to have some kind of website, which can serve as a central registry for translations, so that language servers can say, hey, I have an identifier for a library. I'm going to go and grab translations from that. And some kind of organization to provide structure for the project. So I have some other thoughts on a HackMD if people are interested.
I'm clapping.
So any thoughts?
I think this sounds exciting, and it makes a lot of sense, actually. I know several people who were pre-fluent when they got into development, and this was always an area of frustration. Some of those people, I'm like, oh, I wonder if they would be interested in helping you with that bullet point. So we'll reach out and make some intros, Mike, if that would
be awesome.
Yeah. And I wish Ben Michel were here, because I think he would also be clapping and excited too, because
Yeah, I was nudging Ben to be here, and I sent him some screen grabs as it was going.
I'll try and follow up by email with Ben.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
I could see, and I do wonder, just kind of connecting this perhaps with some of our projects. Like, are there? I wonder if there are certain OpenJS projects that would be interested in kind of participating or being guinea pigs, so to speak, on this too.
Yeah, finding a first project to provide translations, I think, would be great. But I think one of the things that would be really nice is if people who wanted to translate a library could do that without, having to gate on source code. I think APIs and identifiers tend to be pretty stable just because they're a backwards compatibility concern. So. I think having a guinea pig would be great, but I think ultimately the goal would be, hey, there's a project that's widely used but not maintained at all. We can still get it translated.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? Can you? I think it's slide 2. Could you show that?
Slide 2. Yes.
Yeah. So I think in here you said that like the autocomplete, you type year and you get año there?
Yeah.
Año. Okay. Sorry, I don't actually speak Spanish. But like, how does that wind up giving you like lots of false positives in a confusing way or something?
So my thinking, and I think I would defer to whoever's kind of, whoever has the developer experience chops to kind of make a call one way or another. If somebody started typing año, I think it would be fine for it to display, year año as an option. And so I think filtering either by either the actual identifier or the translation would be fine. But I think what has to end up in the source file is the majority language identifier, just for compatibility concerns.
Right. It'll be interesting when people start using it to see what their comments are, because it's hard to speculate, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anytime you're doing anything even like that even borders on novel within a user interface, you always get kind of you always realize that your mind works differently from that of many of your users.
Yeah.
You mentioned, some of the other needs are like a home to provide some structure. One thing that I wonder is if this would make a good collab space, within, the foundation has these forums for projects to get, and by projects, I don't mean like our existing necessarily like the foundation projects, but projects like this, like the package vulnerability work, like that kind of thing, which are more cross project and cross community, support. And I kind of wonder if this would make a good, if this would be a good use of a collab space, or I should say, if this would be, the needs of this project would be met by a collab space as an option.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And then that kind of like just the thinking being like, because what you possibly want is like the organic ability to grow in whichever direction the project needs to grow before doing something ultra formal. So I think that could be.
I think the reason I'm bringing this before kind of the standards group is I think that there is some standards work around LSP, and I don't know whether or not the OpenJS Foundation wants to be kind of involved with LSP and related standards like LFIP and DAP.
Where are those being developed?
So in my maybe Tierney actually might have the most visibility into this as a Microsoftie, though I know that Microsoft is a giant place.
I don't have any direct insight, unfortunately.
Okay.
I could probably figure something out, but
if I could lean on you down the road to for maybe an intro, that would be great. But I don't actually have anything right now. But the answer is Microsoft. VS Code. I think an awful lot of this work is coming out of the VS Code team, and I don't know. My sense is it's VS Code people in Germany. But like there's a lot of stuff going on GitHub. They're kind of a little bit slow to respond to things, but like they're pretty good about they seem to be nice people. So yeah, I don't know that there's like any kind of organizing body. It's basically a bunch of people on GitHub putting out spec-like documents.
Okay, so it's not there's not like a formal standardization activity.
Don't quote me on this. Okay. It sounds like they're heading. It sounds like that's kind of my sense is that they're working in a way that would be compatible with moving to that if the need arose. So
cool.
And my sense is that there's plenty of people in that org who have done standards work in the past.
Cool. It sounds like you already know a lot of the VS Code peeps. Know that there are lots of them kind of in the Foundations network anyway. So I think that's another thing from like the OpenJS side. Should you need intros.
I actually don't know many of the VS Code people. Most of the
okay.
Microsoft people I know are either doing weird functional language stuff or kind of are TypeScripters.
Okay, well that's something else maybe we can do is just like start a dialogue and perhaps through that'd be maybe helpful.
Yeah, and it seems like kind of the .d.ts model of like you can contribute type metadata about a project, even if it's not written in TypeScript. That kind of model may be a great way for doing translation stuff, especially if you need to map identifiers through Uglify, because source map, of course, allows you to map source identifiers to translated identifiers and that kind of stuff. So.
This is dope. I'm excited. Okay, so it sounds like I found some things that I can help with. I can make intros, so that's cool.
Yeah, if I think you had you had some answers to bullet point number 1 on people who worked as devs while pre-fluent, and that's awesome. And thanks for your thoughts on the homework. I don't understand kind of what the collapse space stuff is, but I'll look into it.
Cool. All right. Any other comments or queries for Mike Samuel?
You're great, Mike.
Yes, other than you're awesome. All right, cool. Thank you very much. This would be cool. Moving to our next issue, which is issue 142, document delegates and delegate approval process. It was pointed out on Slack that finding out who is a delegate on behalf of the foundation is for any given group isn't super clear. Emily who was like, oh, it's right here, but Emily knows where everything is because he's just like that good. And I'm the one who probably put it there and I didn't remember where it was. So what this means is it's not particularly well surfaced. And I wonder if there's something, I guess we have this member representation markdown file. I just wonder if there's something else we want to do to make it more clear when we're saying a person is representing our group, either in a time-based way because they're just there to kind of promote like a specific proposal or issue, or hey, they've been appointed for a term of 2 years or something of that sort. Any ideas or strong feelings about how we do that? Or is it just like, nah, Jory, just like make a pull request and update it, please?
I'm fine with the latter.
Okay, so maybe this is just something we can then, like, starting from now on, as soon like okay, we do one pull request to just like bring that file up to date, and then from then on, once a decision is made, that's part of the memorialization of that decision, like that a pull request is opened to add that person to the file, and we just need to operationalize that so that with the file stays up to date. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing is open a pull request and update the file, please, Dory. Joe, did you say something?
Please and thank you.
Please with the chair. Okay. Okay, so the answer to the question is, do we have strong feelings? No. Jory, to open a PR to update. All right. All right, that's a very short issue. Appreciate y'all. Anything else on that? No. Okay, I thought I heard somebody start to interject. The last issue tag today was issue 130, the ongoing discussion request issue of standards education / onboarding resources. But now, if you click that link, did it work right? Yes, it's redirecting if you click the link that's in the notes. Why? Because Jory finally did her action items from like 3 weeks ago or something, a month ago from the before time, to create a new GitHub repo for this work. It's under the OpenJS Foundation /standards-ed-site. And there are 3 issues now on the site. One is this issue, which is capturing all of the just resources that we've gathered so far, so all of those. The next issue is the questions that we want to kind of use to kind of curate the experience for people. And we had a brainstorm on that a few weeks ago, and I captured those from the notes. And then a third issue was from Ben, actually, who suggested that we maybe also consider converting some of the materials that we have identified into short videos, or perhaps even doing a video AMA series, which was actually Mike Samuel's idea from 2 months ago, I think. Thank you, Mike. It's still a good idea. So that's the third issue. So now we've got the separate space to capture all of the education priority stuff separate of the standards working group repo. And I think that's good. The last week, not last week, 2 weeks ago, last time we met, Mike Samuel also had another great idea around sort of personas and thinking about like how people with different experiences, different backgrounds kind of come to these questions. And do we want to identify some of the first couple of personas, if you will, to curate content for? I thought that was really a useful way of perhaps getting initial information out there. And I wondered if today we could spend a few minutes sort of thinking about what those first one or two Lego personas, you called them like Lego pieces, I think too, which is another interesting way of putting it. What those Lego pieces are to get started, because otherwise this could be one of these things that takes an eternity because we're dreaming up thousands of different types of people, Lego people.
Yeah. So on the video series thing, I think that was actually Ben's idea.
Well, Ben said the video series, but you said that you volunteered to do an AI. That's it. I'm just trying to make sure everybody gets credit.
Yeah, I think I was mentioning that I had thought I'd seen somebody using a bunch of Lego characters to represent different kind of user personas and people involved in a software development lifecycle. And I could not find where I had seen that, but I had thought it was a good idea at the time. And so, yeah, there's different kinds of users. And just for example, PHP gets a bad name, but it allows an awful lot of mom and pop kind of shops to put together a web storefront and make some money selling stuff online and have a livelihood, even though they have absolutely minimal technical skills. And so that's an example of a user persona. And so different different cross sections based on what are their goals when they interact with software, what skills do they bring technically, what value do they bring based on their non-technical skills. The more technically skilled somebody may be, tends to be, they don't have as much skill outside of the technical realm. And so, those kinds of things. But you wanted to capture some specifics?
Yeah, so because we've started to gather these kind of these resources, and the resources are all geared toward perhaps different types of users. They need to be contextualized for the audience properly as well. Like you don't want to just say, oh, here's this link, and then okay, well, what does this mean to me? User A. So if we can help sort of frame up some of the resources in a more helpful way to them, that would be good, I think.
Yeah, and so I think to Brian Cardill's question, kind of what is it about the persona that kind of identifies it? And I guess in the case of the shopkeeper, they've got a lot of skill interacting with potential customers in the real world. But they're making a foray into the online world, and maybe this is very 1980s, but they're making a foray into the online world, and so they're looking for something that kind of they have no skill in dealing with the way they provide value is their knowledge of their customers, and how they relate to other people one-on-one, not their ability to put angle brackets in the right place.
But they're still the kind of person who would choose programming as opposed to something more visual, point and clicky like Wix or.
I mean, maybe maybe the WYSIWYG site editors would be something that they end up with today. Back a decade ago, maybe it's they use one of the PHP CMSs.
Mike Champion, you got your hand up. And you're gone. Oh no. I bet he's on the move, so I bet he got disconnected.
So I unfortunately missed the last meeting and the minutes as well. So maybe this is just like a too naive a question, but like for the personas idea, was it like to describe users or like all different kinds of people who play some role that you might interact with?
It's who has an interest. If I recall correctly, the question was kind of like, how can we do a better job of making sure that we recognize the groups with different needs when it comes to the standards process.
Okay.
So, standards produced by large companies are very good at meeting the needs of developers hired by those large companies. Probably those large companies' customers, less so maybe other groups.
Okay.
I think one of the main groups that I thought about when we were first like coming up with this idea was the demographic of developer who has now been, working for a few years. They've come to understand and be comfortable in their tech stack and their domain, but they're asking sort of like the questions of the what, why, how to grow their knowledge of a given space further, and also asking the questions of like, well, where did these sort of decisions come from? And I'm trying to promote my champion back again, if it will let me. Come on, there it is. Mike, are you back with us?
Yeah, but only for a second, since
Okay.
I'm getting off a ferry and I won't be able to pay attention. So anyway, yeah. Anyway, well, I'm not sure if you heard any of my comment, but I'll put it in Slack. So when I can get back.
Okay, yeah, we didn't hear you, unfortunately. I
No,
think
that's okay. I mean, I just anyway, bad reception. Anyway, yeah, I'll put something in Slack later. And
Okay.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Mike. So that's like, to me, that group was one of my priority groups, mostly because I feel like another reason for doing this is to kind of help make the standard space more just inclusive, particularly to newcomers. So I thought thinking about those newer folks first was, but I don't know if that's enough information to really scope a specific persona just yet.
I think if maybe we should start kind of just gathering some notes, and I think people are complex and multivariate, and any group of personas is going to necessarily stereotype to some degree, but if we start getting something concrete down, then maybe that's better than I think collect more examples and then filter and merge, or kind of figure out where the gaps are afterwards.
And then kind of connecting it back to your slash Ben's idea of doing the video AMA type. I think it started as like, oh, what if we used one of Joe's office hours, or we did a query me this because we can't call it AMA type thing to try and start gathering questions that people have. If that's still something that we'd be interested in, I can talk to Rachel about that today as a means through which like we at least start getting maybe real questions from real people as opposed to the fictional questions that we think that maybe somebody might ask.
So I don't know if this is in the realm of the thing that we're talking about or not, but like I have a lot of contact with developers and hear through channels of people who have a lot of contact with developers that they have different impressions and also different frustrations or different fears about like engaging with standards or different questions about how to even engage with different standards bodies and things. And what comes up a lot in these conversations with other people is that like there is some degree of understanding how the process and the people work that change like probably how you would perceive it. And I feel like I'm not articulating this very well, unfortunately. But for example, there are, you know, the CSS working group works very differently than the what working group. And there are like different things about like the terseness or the short direct language or things like that that are just sort of part of how they work and why they work, because they work a lot of issues and they're just sort of very efficient with their communication, even with one another. Like it is frequently perceived as more off-putting than it need to be, I guess. I don't know if there's like some way we can help that by offering something that like helps answer those sorts of questions and explain the sort of nuance about like when you interact with these groups, this is what it means. Like if you say you file something on CSS working group, and like when should you expect a response or a spec or a, like these are like fairly basic questions that a lot of people don't have any perception of like how it should work, or like or am I just getting blown off? Is somebody irritated with me? Is I don't know. Like, do any of the words that I just said mean anything to anyone but me? I'm not really sure.
I pick up what you're putting down. I think, you know, you're sort of asking this, like, you know, is there something that we can do to answer questions of a social nature, because you want people to take the right interpretation when it takes Tab 3 weeks to respond, because Tab is like a really busy person, you know. So yeah, I get it. I do think that those are some things that should fit into the resource site too, because it should be like not just here's how it works from like a very operational standpoint, but also probably like a was it a fairly short and direct sentence? You know, that's pretty fine. That's pretty normal. Don't take that to mean
exactly. Or another thing that people do very frequently is to say like, oh, this was discussed before in this issue, and they link it to that issue, and you know, a lot of people take that as like oh, well, I guess I don't matter then or something. But
Yeah.
really, people are just trying to keep the links alive and keep track of things and keep conversations in the same place.
Yeah.
Linking an issue isn't necessarily a commentary on like
Your
the quality
issue.
of your issue or anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think those are like some really subtle things that it can take a long time to like get a grip on, and they're not the same everywhere. Like they work a little bit differently in all the different places. And I know that can be intimidating, and also I know developers sometimes can extrapolate many of those into like larger,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like ideas about whether they think that group even works.
Right.
So
So I'm just noting the time, and we did have like one thing that we wanted to chat about off cam. And Brian, this is your 4-minute warning for your hard
yes,
stop.
thank you so much.
So I'm going to close our live stream. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you in those weeks. And let me